Hello there, and welcome to this edition of Marshall Sylver Live. Very excited for our guest today. It's a gentleman I've known for a long time. In fact, we got a chance to share some time at Disney World in Florida. He is an amazing motivational speaker, trainer, coach. He is a pilot as well. And although he didn't want me to mention it, I mention it because it has a lot to do with the discipline and the focus and the things that he teaches people to make sure that you not only get to where you're going, you get there safely. With great pleasure, I introduce to you my great friend, Gary Coxe. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Marshall. So good to see you again.
We had so much fun at Disney World.
I remember it well.
That was cool.
It was so nice. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
It was good hanging out with you. And I watch you, online. You've got such a presence. You take a lot of people down to the Caribbean.
Yep, Sandals Resorts.
I know you have a deal with Sandals.
Yeah, our sponsor.
That's very cool.
It's been a blessing.
So tell me more about what you're doing these days.
Well, I'm focusing a lot on our mastermind, so that's where I take people in the jet and they have the opportunity to spend the day with me. I also do some joint ventures with other, coaches and clients and so forth. And we go to the Bahamas. We give them an incredible experience. Everything from the moment they land, there's a police escort there. We don't have them go through customs. That's not needed. I mean, we just rock the whole thing. They get breakfast and lunch, dinner at Sandals, and then they have the opportunity. We go on the dock of the ocean, and we go ahead and do our mastermind. And my job there is several things. One, to help people shift their thinking, where, as you well know, sometimes it's just one little shift to make things work smarter, not harder. And then the other thing is most people are not blessed like myself and you to fly a jet, or at least on a regular basis. And you know as well as I do, it makes you realize that, wait a minute, this is a whole nother game to play. And if you've never done it on a regular basis, you start thinking differently to figure out, how can I do this more? What can I do smarter? And it'll literally shift the way you operate your business and your life.
Absolutely. I believe that people vote with their wallets.
100%.
And a wallet once expanded will never contract.
100%. A luxury sampled once becomes a necessity.
Yes. I tell people, fly privately once, you'll like it. Fly twice, you'll like it a lot. Fly 3 times, you're ruined.
You're done.
My wife wanted to go to Alaska for our 17th anniversary, and the charter was going to be $100K.
Yeah.
And because it was our anniversary, we'd only planned to be in Alaska for 3.5 days. I said, it's a lot for the charter. So I booked, for the first time in probably 15, 20 years, I booked a commercial flight.
Wow.
And we were getting ready to go up to Alaska, and it was during the week that Alaska Airlines had the panel fly off the side of their plane.
I remember that.
And so they grounded all their planes, they postponed all their flights, and I was already feeling bad enough about flying commercially. And then when that happened, I told Erica, I said, you know what, we're only going to have our 17th anniversary once.
That's right.
So I'm going to pay for it. We're going to do it, and I'm so glad that we did.
Yes, good for you.
I was so glad that we did.
That's a heck of a day.
I'm reminded that you're right. A lot of people don't realize how their lives can be.
No, they don't. In fact, as an illustration for me, I remember when I got heavy into flying that I never realized that I could be flying jets. I never thought that big until one day somebody needed somebody in the right seat to test the jet out. And oh my gosh, it's like, the center lines on the runway became one because it took off so fast.
Right.
And it expanded my mind. And that's why I love, doing what I do and hanging with people like you and having people, hanging with me and vice versa, because it does expand. And as we know, proximity is power, right? And you've got to make sure you stay in that proximity. If not, you get programmed with the crap that you've had in your past.
So I got to ask you, I saw a post you posted earlier. You were in a helicopter.
Yeah.
Were you flying the helicopter?
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, I fly helicopters too. It depends on which post. But yeah,
that's remarkable.
Yeah, I fly helicopters.
Because they're different beasts.
You can have $1 million flying an airplane. It will do you no good in a helicopter. Literally no good.
Yeah.
They're amazing machines. I love them.
I have a friend of mine who flies, Jordan Elder. You know Jordan?
Mm-mm.
Jordan flies helicopters.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a friend who said he flew helicopters. And the guy, he interacted with him. They talked. They had meals together. And the friend claimed, I fly helicopters too. He said, great, let's go fly my helicopter. They went to fly the helicopter, and the guy was completely full of crap.
Right.
Had never flown a helicopter ever.
Yeah.
Gets in and crashed it immediately.
Oh, shoot.
No, they took 6 feet off the ground.
Oh, yeah, you're
crashed immediately.
Yeah.
So it's a different beast.
You'll never hear somebody in a helicopter as a passenger and the pilot, have a heart attack or something and they survive, and it's not going to happen.
No, I mean, again, it's a different beast.
It's a different beast.
But here's what I like about flight. When my book, Passion, Profit, and Power, got published by Simon & Schuster. They flew me out to New York. And when they flew me out, MGM had an airline for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And they were taking, I think, 737s, and they were turning them into private airplanes.
Right.
And so they had suites in the back, they had bedrooms in the back, and they had a bar in there, and it was just an amazing flight.
Yeah.
And there was only like half a dozen people on this entire plane, and they were using it for their high rollers, for their whales.
Sure.
And I went to the front of the plane, and I'm talking to the pilot, and I'm joking, and I said to the pilot, "So are we on course?" And the pilot said, "Nope." And I said, "No, seriously, are we on course?" He said, "Nope." And I said, "Are you joking?" He said, "No, I'm serious." He said, "In fact, we're going to spend the majority of the flight off course." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "See, that's the thing about flying." He said, "It's always an adjustment. You're adjusting back and forth. We're going to end up at the destination. We'll get there on time.
Yeah.
The majority of the flight, though, is just corrections." And I thought, what a phenomenal metaphor for life.
Yeah, I share that with people because, we like say, I'm out of Florida, so that's where I take the jet out of Florida, typically to the Bahamas. And if you're like 2 degrees off for any length of time, you're going to end up friggin' over Cuba, and they're going to bring you down.
Right.
And on the other hand, too, if you're not doing well and you're off 2 degrees and just that, you're going to get on course.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of great metaphors in aviation that can help people be applicable to their success.
Well, I also think, just the mere act, my son, for Christmas,
Yeah.
asked for flight lessons.
No way.
Yeah, he asked for flight lessons, and
Yes.
he's 12 right now, about to turn 13.
Did you give them to him?
Yeah, absolutely.
You get him in a glider. You know that, right? He can solo as 14 years old in a glider.
I didn't know that.
Get him in a glider. Get him in a glider first.
Good.
I mean, it's the best training because especially at that age, meaning he can't get a license at 16 and in an airplane, get him in a glider. He can solo at 14. And I'm an instructor for gliders as well. And I am just ready for something because of having a glider because you don't have an engine.
Right.
And it does make you a better pilot.
Good.
No question about it.
Well, when he said he wanted flight lessons, I've always wanted flight lessons and never gotten around to it.
Yeah, it'll open his whole world.
Well, it's going to open up my world too.
No doubt. Yeah.
And the thing too, that I think about is we use metaphors at our events. We have people eating fire and walking on broken glass, and the metaphor ultimately, the lesson always is it's easier than you're making it.
Yes.
And so that's what I think about flying is that most people make it more difficult than it needs to be because they're in their head.
Yeah.
And so what a great metaphor for people to say, look, we're going to take a very complex process
Right.
and we're going to make it very simple.
Simplify it.
We're going to simplify it. So tell me about your clients. Tell me about who you work with, and tell me more about you.
Yeah, I mean, most of my clients are a lot of them are millionaires, very successful. Some of them are, working their business, and the clientele that I have are usually entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs, and those are the individuals that want just a different edge on things. They also want access to me because, I've done so many, like you, done a lot of TV shows. I did Dr. Phil Show, The Doctors, for about 3 years on that one. So I help people get access to, hundreds of casting producers of TV shows. Because, again, that's another thing. People don't think big enough. And you know the power of television, especially back then. Now television goes on internet, so you get double whammy. So I get people to expand more. And a lot of times, as you had mentioned, I heard you earlier on a previous podcast, so much of the problems that we have often in our business and our personal life stems from the things that are stuck in our emotional hard drive.
Right.
And if I or you, if we can get people to release the things in their emotional hard drive, and again, it's like the airplane. You can have an airplane at 100% power. It flies great. When we were bringing the jet over here over the mountains into Nevada, we started getting ice on the airplane. So if you leave that ice on the airplane, that airplane's going to start slowing down even if you still have your 100% power. So many times what happens is, and again, with you, I'm preaching to the choir, when we want and we feel and we know that we can do something, but for some reason we know what it is that we need to do, but we can't get ourselves to do it, there's some hidden stuff back there.
Right.
And, my story, as you know, I was very blessed. I was making over $100,000 a year as a teenager. I was like 11 years old when I started my first business, 15 at second. And then I remember going to school and realizing this is such a waste of time. And I started getting in the jewelry business. I loved repairing jewelry. I started repairing jewelry. And I remember one day, I'll never forget this, Marshall. I felt there was a lot of money in my pocket because I was selling jewelry to the girls in school, right? So I went in the bathroom stall. I'll never forget this dark blue bathroom stall. And I didn't want anybody to see me. So I went inside and I stood up on the toilet and I counted this money. It was $400. And that's, that was years ago. That's equivalent to a couple thousand a day, right?
Sure.
I'm thinking $400, sit here and waste my butt in school. Are you kidding me? I went to the high school principal right after that and I said, hey, I'm going to make a deal with you, right? Here's the deal. This is my junior year. I said to him, look, I have a goal and it's not a good goal, and the goal is to quit school. you would agree that it is a good goal. I agree it's really a good goal. But
Yes.
anyway, so I said to him, here's the deal. I want to start my own business. You know how you have those job programs where you go to school part-time and you get to go to work part-time, that type of thing. So I said, here's what the deal is. My senior year, I don't even want to show up in school. I want to do my own business full-time. I know I have to have a supervisor to grade me, so there is no supervisor, so I'm going to have to grade myself, and I want to walk away with my diploma. And he said yes. So for my senior year, never showed up in school, gave myself 4.0.
Good for you.
It's not what you know, but who you know, right? So, and that's how it got started. Then I got married. We had a baby, and that's when things changed. Later on, my wife tells me that baby wasn't mine. My grandfather and stepfather died of cancer, and then my uncle was killed in a plane crash. I got a phone call from my mom to let me know my father had just been shot point blank in his chest, drowned in his own blood.
Holy cow.
By the time I was 21 years of age. Then I was unfortunately born and raised in a cult. I left that cult about 15 years ago.
Which cult?
Jehovah's Witnesses. And then when you leave that cult, they're programmed
They shun you.
to shun you, treat you as if you're dead. That put me in a mental tailspin.
One of the biggest indicators that it's a cult is when you leave.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I formed this belief, and it makes sense. People often ask me, what's your definition of a cult? It's something that you cannot honorably leave.
Right.
And I could not honorably leave, but I chose to. It was a lot harder than I thought. My father being murdered, my wife telling me my baby's not mine is literally a cakewalk compared to leaving that cult, because my whole belief system that I had, it's like, oh crap, I don't know what to believe now.
Well, and you lost all your friends simultaneously.
Oh,
I had a similar circumstance. My second marriage,
Yeah.
my wife joined a Christian cult, but it was the exact same
Yes,
thing. I mean,
yes.
it was as hardcore as it could be.
Yeah.
And when I called the pastor out on the fact that he was hypnotizing the congregation
Yeah.
to donate to the church, he said, I'm not hypnotizing people. I said, you are. You're using hypnotic language patterns.
Yeah.
Well, that's just the way I talk. I said, you trained yourself.
Yeah.
I'm a professional. I know this.
Right.
And so they kicked me out of the church. I'm married, and my wife's still in the church. They kick me out. They order everybody else in the church. They can't talk to me.
Yes.
They can't have
yes,
anything to do with
yeah.
me.
They don't
My
want you
wife's
that
still
influence.
there.
Really?
And so they're speaking in my then wife's ear and saying, you can't talk to him either. I'm going,
Right.
how does that work? She
Yep.
lives with me.
Exactly. Yeah, the same thing.
And so for me, it was devastating to me because I lost every friend that
Yeah.
I was working so hard
Wow,
to
I did not
create.
know that about you.
I love God deeply, but I didn't like religion.
Yeah, yeah, it's a crazy thing, and it's something that I'm very blessed that I was doing what I was doing when in it, because that helped me move ahead and create the strategies necessary to keep pushing forward. And the ripple effects are still there. I have to. You're doing something every single day. In fact, it was so intense, Marshall, that when it's so programmed. Like every Sunday you're doing this, Monday you're doing I'm doing this for 40 plus years.
Right.
It took me, when I left, nearly 6 months. I had to look at a calendar.
How old were you when you left?
In my 40s, mid 40s.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it took me nearly
Your whole identity.
100%. And for 6 months, I had to keep looking for a calendar to figure out what day of the week it was, because I was so conditioned. It was crazy.
Well, glad you're here. Glad you escaped that insanity.
I am so blessed for that, right?
I look back on those days and I say, what was I ever thinking?
Right? And that tells you that smart people can believe dumb things.
Well, and that's where we are today.
Yes.
That's where we are. I've
Right?
got friends that I love very much.
Yeah.
And the things they tell me they believe, I just look at them and I say,
What are you thinking?
It doesn't make any sense. I have a friend of mine in the seminar business
Yeah.
that is one of my dearest friends, and he got sick. And when he was sick, I called him up and I said, did you get a vaccination? And he said, nah. And I said, okay. And he was
lied to you?
sick. And then he was in the hospital extended.
Oh,
He was in the hospital for like 6 months.
Oh, crap.
And then finally he comes out of the hospital. He said he had long COVID. And I didn't say anything. He gets out of the hospital and we're on the phone one day and he says, I need to confess something to you. I said, what's that? He said, I lied. I said, what do you mean? He said, I was embarrassed about getting a vaccination. He said, not only did I get the vax, I got boosted twice.
Shoot.
He said, and after the second one, he said, I was immediately sick, immediately in the hospital, didn't leave for 6 months, almost was certain I was going to die. He said, everything that happened to me happened because of the vaccine. And this guy's brilliant. At his peak, his company was doing $350 million a year in seminar sales. And so, when he said all that, again, it's highly intelligent people that got pulled into something.
Right.
And the cognitive dissonance
Yes,
is so strong,
it's major.
they don't want to acknowledge
100%.
I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we are right now in the world, is I think that so much is coming out, so much of the corruption, all this stuff on the Hunter Biden laptop that they said was disinformation.
Right.
We now know was 100% real.
Right.
Everything going on. We got videotape of Biden extorting the Ukraine, for $1 billion in aid. And again, with all the evidence, people don't see it.
Right.
And I take it down to, more of a micro level that politics and all of the insanity aside,
Right.
it's also true on a personal level for them.
100%.
That if you would just give your wife respect, you'd have a better relationship.
Yep.
If you would just get off your ass and actually do something,
Right.
your financial challenges would go away.
Yep. Yeah, no, and I think, I tell people one of the reasons, we're so programmed to make excuses, and there's three things that we're constantly doing consciously, whether we realize it or not, whether it be for the good or the bad, and that's to justify our excuses and justify why we do what we do. We shift the blame and we minimize it. And if we could consciously remember that, because I said it kind of fast, if we could consciously remember those things, we justify why we do what we do, we shift the blame, or we minimize it. And if you're consciously aware that you're doing that all the time and you can catch that, it can make a game changer. But the reason a lot of times we don't want to do that is because then we have to admit that we're wrong and we have to take responsibility. And that's not always an easy thing to do because we always have somebody to blame. And I had to learn very quickly, I cannot blame this cult. I don't want to blame my mother. It wasn't her choice technically for me to be born.
Well, what good would it do you to blame them?
It doesn't change a thing. It doesn't change a thing. So it's a problem between me and not me and them. And, once I get that figured out, I'm good to go. So here I am.
Something so funny is ultimately I divorced that wife.
Yes.
She ended up dating
I did the same.
Yeah, she ended up dating both the marriage counselor that we were seeing
and
one of the other pastors in the church too.
Right.
And so there was a time when I couldn't drive past the church on the street, even years later. I couldn't drive past it because it was such a negative trigger to me.
Yes.
And when I met my wife, my one true wife, Erica,
yes,
we would go to a restaurant nearby, and she would ask me why I drove the long way to get to the restaurant.
Right.
And I said, it's a mind trigger.
Yeah.
It's, that experience over there. One day, I'm driving, and Erica's sitting beside me, and my two sons, my daughter hadn't been born yet, are sitting in the back seat. And we're driving from the restaurant back to the house, and I'm not thinking. And I turn down the road where that church was, and I'm thinking, I need to turn. I need to take a side street. And then I decide not to. And I drive past the church, and I felt like the clouds parted.
Yes.
And the angels sang.
Yes.
Because I realized that something that I thought was so bad in my life ended up being one of the biggest blessings ever in my life, because it made me realize what evil was.
Right.
So now that I was with my wife, I knew what goodness was.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, no matter what you're going through, there's a reason. There's a lesson that you have to learn, and to find it wrong is a waste of your time,
Right.
no matter how bad it is. I just had a very dear friend, 51 years old, went over to Bali, epitome of health, raw food for the last 20 years, never drank,
Wow.
epitome of health. He goes to Bali, he gets an infection, he takes ibuprofen, and he died within 2 hours.
What?
Instantly dead. And my wife got sick with an infection a couple of weeks ago, and our friend had just died, and she wouldn't take any pain reliever because she was so afraid of it. Ultimately, we ended up taking her to the emergency ward, and they said that if she had taken that, she would have died.
No way.
So again, as much as I miss my friend, he doesn't obviously know because he's died.
Right.
He saved her life.
Yeah.
We would have given her ibuprofen. We would have.
That's true.
And so, I think that so many times that people need to acknowledge that I believe in a higher power. I believe in God. And I believe that God ultimately just wants what's best for me. That often I think what's best for me just isn't.
Right. And it's funny you say that, because my programming in all that crap was when you're doing bad, not necessarily doing bad, but when things are really hard, then you're doing the right thing for God.
Right.
So I'm constantly having to condition myself that when things are good, I don't need to take crazy, stupid risks to get into the struggle mode again.
Right.
So there's so many patterns, and we all
that's
have
part of what the cult does too.
Oh,
the cult wants you in
100%.
unrest. The cult wants you dissatisfied and unstable,
fearful, constantly,
always, because that's the power.
Guilt. Yeah.
And I think that's what's going on in the government right now.
Yeah.
I think that the government wants us unstable. That's why they're letting all these illegals. Now illegals are, Tyson Food is saying we're going to hire all these illegals. I remember in my younger years, because I have a home in San Diego, that they would come into businesses and they would check IDs and make sure that all your workers were actually legally allowed to be there. And now they're saying, no, we're going to hire the illegals. Oh, by the way, they can have guns too.
Yes.
Which I think is ironic, because, the Democrats have for years been trying to attack our gun rights, but now they're saying we want to give illegals gun rights. So again, coming back to what I said though, what could the goodness be? So gun rights are appropriate. Well, quit attacking the Second Amendment if you want to arm illegal people.
Right.
You got to stop one or the other. You got to choose one or the other. So again, enough of the drama, enough of the politics, enough of the religion.
How do you really feel, Marshall?
Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your distinction and what you teach people. You've been highly successful. I know that your clients are massively successful business people. You have a different kind of a niche in that I've seen your clients are higher end clients than most people in in our space.
Yeah.
You know, I tend to deal more with the general public, and yours are elite. They are the private jet traveling, business owning, high-end clients. What makes you unique, and why would somebody choose you over some other coach?
Yeah, I think they know that I can relate to them when they hear my story, because I'm not a BSer. I'm not into the fluff stuff. You know, I'm like you. You give practical, specific things to do, and people want that, you know. And if you give them that, and it's something that can get them a result, then it only makes sense. And for me, I've always, once I got into this realm, I've always wanted to think about how can I get bigger and bigger. So I would always go for the whales. I'd always go for the billion-dollar companies. So I've been blessed to work with billion-dollar companies. I would go for the big TV shows and things like that. And, you know, it's like selling a house. If you're a realtor, it takes just as much energy to sell a $2 million house as it does a $200,000 house.
Right.
So that's just been my mindset. And what it's done for me is I've done over, 3,000 speaking engagements. So that means I have met over 3,000 decision makers, and I'm learning from them. They think they're bringing me in to learn from me, but I'm just eating it up and learning from them. So that gives me a decent amount of knowledge where I can share with, you know, different CEOs about, you know, and I was also blessed to be mentored by a billionaire. He unfortunately died a number of years ago.
Who mentored you?
The owner of Sandals Resorts, Butch Stewart. Yeah. And
That's your relationship with Sandals.
Yes. So that has been like a massive eye-opener to really watch and see how a true, legit billionaire operates a company. And then I'm able to share that with people, which is, and it's changed my life, you know. And you don't have to be a billionaire to live like a billionaire. People don't understand the importance of truly delegating the right people to the right things, and I know you're big about that, because the whole idea is to buy that time, and that's why we fly, you know, privately. You buy your time, and if you can get to the point where you feel that your time is that valuable, and stop and think about it. People think, you know, well, Gary, that's a little crazy. Well, whoever thinks that's crazy, they're doing the same thing. That person drives a car. Why don't they walk?
Right.
Because their time is more valuable to drive than walk.
Right.
We've just taken our time to another level where our time's more valuable to have our own airplane and fly.
That's a phenomenal analogy.
Yeah, it is. Because, you know, why? I mean, there's somebody out there that walks, thinks that you're doing amazing because you got a bicycle, and the bicycle person, the car, the jet, and so on.
Well, the excuse is always, the comment is always, oh, isn't it so expensive to fly privately? But that's a great analogy, because isn't it so expensive to drive a car?
And they'll think,
it would be
no,
cheaper to walk.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't cost you anything to walk.
Right.
But you don't do it because it's too much work.
Yeah, and their time is worth that much.
Right.
Yeah. So, and a lot of that, as you know, it's belief in yourself. You've got to create that belief where, you know, how do I get myself to believe that and have so much value in myself? And it changes the game. It's a beautiful way to live.
One of the other metaphors about private flights is you don't have an option. You must deal with what emerges. So it doesn't do you any good to go, man, I'm screwed.
Right.
I hate this circumstance, because the moment you say that, you're dead.
Yeah.
I was flying. I have two stories from a single pilot. The first private pilot I ever flew with, we were coming back from Mexico. We were in Cabo, and I was with Erica, just the two of us on the back of a CJ. And we're flying in the jet, and as we're flying, the pilot turns around, and single pilot, because it's a CJ, he said, do you want to see something interesting? And we said, yeah. He said, I've got to bank the plane severely to show this to you. He said, so sit on the right side of the plane. I'm going to turn it on its side so you can see this best. So we're flying along. He turns the plane sideways, and in the middle of Mexico, in the middle of nowhere, on the top of a mountain, was a crashed airplane.
Oh, shoot.
And I look at that, and he rights the plane, and I said, holy cow. He said, you want to hear something interesting? I said, sure. He said, every single person walked away from that crash without a scratch. I said, holy crap. How do you know that? He said, I was the pilot. And I just went, wow. And a few years later, we're flying from San Francisco back into Vegas, and it's a different route in than if we were coming from San Diego.
Right.
And we're coming over the mountains, and I'm sitting in the back of the plane with my wife in my right hand, and because we fly so much, I guess we gotten comfortable, we weren't belted. And we're flying along, they're both sleeping, they're reclined and they're sleeping.
Right.
I'm not sleeping, I'm semi-reclined. We hit air, and all four of us launched into the ceiling. Hard. Really hard. The pilot, single pilot, he's the only one there because it's a CJ, turns around and he says, you guys okay? He had a gash across the top of his eye, about 4 inches long. It was big. And his whole side of his face, the whole side of his shirt was covered in blood. He had hit the visor.
Holy moly.
He had hit the
yeah.
visor, and it cut his whole face open. And I said, "Yeah, are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm bleeding a little bit." He's covered in blood, and he landed the plane safely because that's what he's required to do.
Yes.
And I have an analogy. I have an analogy. If all of us were required to have $1 million in our bank account by the time we were 18, couldn't steal it, couldn't get it illegally, couldn't be gifted it, couldn't inherit it, or we were put to death as a useless human being, then our entire plan would be, when we were a kid, our parents' plan for us would be, how are you going to make that $1 million?
100%.
I don't want you to be put to death as a useless member of society.
Right.
And so if it was possible, with that life-threatening consequence, then it's possible. And so, when I'm selling, that's one of the metaphors I use.
I like it.
We sell a $70,000 ticket, and I say, if somebody had a gun to the head of someone you loved and you had to come up with $70,000 within 72 hours, couldn't steal it, got to get it legally, how many of you would find a way to get it?
Right.
They'll put their hands up, and I say, someone has a gun to the head of someone I pray you love. The gun is against your head, and the gun is named time because you're old.
Yeah.
Give me some insights of what you teach a business owner to make their business better. Just some generalities. You just gave us 3. Give me some more.
The biggest thing I see is that they wear too many hats. Period. End of story. And the problem, I think, with so many entrepreneurs is when we get started, we often start because we have a lot more time than we have money. So when you start off having more time than money, you end up doing everything yourself. And then if you're not careful, you'll micromanage. So then you end up hiring people that need micromanage, and before you know it, you're wearing a bunch of hats. So I think that's probably the number one thing, is get people to know that, look, when you get to the next level, there's some commission, there's some profit in that next level. That money needs to go by taking another hat off and getting that next person. Your life changes that way. So, and then also figure out what's your superpower. What is it that you're the very best at? And then focus on that, because you see, and I heard you talking about this earlier, you'll see people that they own the company and they're also trying to do the close, but they suck at closing. Right. So they need to quit that. They need to do what they're best at. And sometimes that's hard to do because you're not used to letting go. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is figuring out what hats are your best hats and get to taking off those other hats as fast as you possibly can. Not to mention, too, of positioning themselves better, depending on, if it's a coach, they need to figure out how to position themselves better in front of the better audience that's got the money for their products and services. So it just depends on the clients. But the biggest thing is definitely the hats. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, and that's what I learned most from my billionaire mentor.
I'm sure.
Because when he would travel, if he needs to go somewhere, he does not pack his clothes.
Right.
Somebody packs his clothes. If we have time, I'll tell you a cool little story. So we had a mutual friend that was not doing well with their health, and he called me up and said, "Hey, we need to go visit them. I'm going to be flying in. You fly in and come meet me, get the car, and drive us over there." I said, "Okay." So I call his pilots and I say, "Hey, so how big of a car do I get? What's going on?" He says, "Well, I don't know if he's going to have his chef or his butler with him." So in other words, he doesn't lift a finger, and it's not because he's arrogant or lazy, right? No. He just knows how to manage his time.
Well, it's a higher and better use of his time.
100%. And
it's that phrase, "This is beneath my pay grade."
Yes, 100%. And there's things that you can do right now. I mean, maybe you don't think you can afford a housekeeper, but hire somebody, even if it's once a month, just to get the process going, to get that programming in your brain. And you have to learn to do that. I remember the first time I got this concept about, one of the biggest reasons I think entrepreneurs don't grow is they have this concept, if you want it done right, do it yourself. Right. And one of my millionaire mentors that I had when I was a teenager, he taught me you got to get rid of that thinking. And so I remember, I'll never forget this. So I said, okay, I'm going to apply this. So we landed the airplane. I had a pilot with me, and typically I sit there and manage the plane being put in the hangar and so forth. I said, you know what? I'm going to go to the office. That's going to buy me 15 to 20 minutes. And you go ahead and do that. I get a phone call 20 minutes later. We just put the tug into the nose of the airplane. And you know what, Marshall? I really didn't get upset because I knew these are the things that I had to do, and these are going to be the consequences of letting go, because nothing's going to be run perfect, but that's going to enable me to grow.
Right.
So, good concept.
Yeah, I teach my kids, you need to learn how to lose.
Yes.
And at first, my son, who plays baseball and he's massively competitive, He did not like that idea.
Yeah.
He said, Daddy, why would I learn how to lose?
Yeah.
I said, because you're going to lose sometimes.
Right.
And part of losing is understanding that's the game.
Yes.
And anybody, the best of the best of the best in anything, they lose
bruise,
sometimes.
right? Yeah.
And it's how they lose. And it's what did they learn when they lost? And what did they change after they learned something? That's going to be what makes them win again. But I think it's the same thing. You know, I was talking earlier to somebody else. If an investor tells me I've never lost money on an investment, I know they're either lying to me or they don't take any risks at all.
Right.
I said, because that's impossible not to lose. And I think that, again, you know, my mother used to make me make my bed. And at 14 years old, I told my mom, I said, unfortunately, nobody other than me ever goes into my bedroom. And I said, Mom, I don't care if my bed is made. I'm just going to get in and mess it up again. And she was insistent. She said, it's a discipline, Marshall. You need to do that discipline. You got to make your bed in the morning. And so I loved my mom, and I didn't want to disappoint her, so I sold my bed. I just got rid of it. And I put a hook in one corner of my room. I put a hook in the closet.
And your hammock?
And I got a hammock.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's what I slept in. And I would wake up in the morning. I would unhook it from the corner. I'd
your
hook
bed
it in the
is
closet,
made.
shut the door. My bed's made. The byproduct was that my room was clear.
Yes.
And now I could rehearse my magic. And I had all the space to rehearse my magic. And so I always tell people it's not an either or world. It's an and world.
Yeah.
So you can have what you want and also.
Yeah.
You know, I obviously been flying privately for about 25 years.
Good for you.
And I love it. And I feel dirty when I have to fly commercially.
I do too. Isn't that terrible? It's not arrogant, but it's true.
No, it's not arrogant. It's just, it's horrible.
Oh my gosh.
You know, you go through TSA and they feel you up, and I'm going, if you're going to feel me up, at least ask me how I want you to feel me up.
Right.
And then all the hassle of walking 90 minutes through the air, so many nightmares.
Hard to jet takeoff.
Yes. And again, that comes back to that question, how valuable is your time?
And that's where people need to really work hard to position themselves so it gets that valuable. And it doesn't take as long as people think, especially when you start getting a feel for it, you know? And that I tell people, get a fix.
Right.
And the fix is smell the jet fuel. The fix is bring a chef in if you can't afford it, but bring him in once a month, or bring a bunch of friends in and have you all pay for it. Get the ball
Hire
going.
the maid for 2 hours.
Exactly. Get the ball, get a fix, and then you realize that's why I like to take people on the Jet Mastermind. They get a fix of this life and they go, okay, what's the piece of the chess that I need to move here in the game to get this more often? And it's amazing what we can accomplish. You know that.
Yeah. What's the biggest challenge that you see people having on a consistent basis, other than wearing too many hats?
Yeah.
What do you think trips people up, even successful people?
The childhood,
Yeah.
the trauma in their past childhood. Yeah, it always. I will always, if it's not necessarily having to be a business strategy, then it's going to be something in their childhood.
How old are you?
I'm just turning 60.
So I'm 61.
Yeah.
You remember Charles Givens?
Yes.
Chuck Givens?
Yes, very
Wealth
well.
Without
Yes,
Risk.
I remember him.
So
yeah.
Chuck was based out of Florida.
Yes, I do.
And
I remember that well.
Charles Givens in the 80s was a motivational speaker.
He was.
And he couldn't sell his books.
Yep.
And then he wrote Wealth Without Risk. He wrote a financial book.
Yep.
And his entire business erupted. And when his business did that, I was already a speaker and a hypnotist, doing seminars and not doing really well financially. And when he wrote that book, I came to the realization that people don't pay for personal development. What they do is they pay for business development and then end up realizing it was personal.
Yes.
So what we do is I call the topics hard topics and soft topics. So a soft topic would be your health. A soft topic would be your relationship. A soft topic would be your joy and your confidence and self-esteem. A hard topic would be, give me $5,000 and I'll teach you how to make it into $10,000.
Right.
So one you can do math with, one is subjective.
Right.
The challenge, though, for speakers and trainers and for us personally is we've got to figure out how to make that soft topic
Objective.
a hard topic.
100%.
And so, again,
becomes
for
a
me,
must.
I know how much a bad relationship costs.
Right. Yeah.
So I know how valuable a good relationship
Yes,
is.
yes.
So I give my wife everything she wants.
Beautiful.
No
Good for you.
question.
Beautiful.
I make sure she's happy, because if she's not happy, nobody in our household is going to be
Right,
happy.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful.
What do you think, besides what's going on in their head, what do you think is the reason that so many people think that, as an example, flying privately is a luxury and not just a business tool? Why do you think they're wired that way?
Because it's not the norm. It's not the norm. I mean, stop and think about it. How many? Well, of course, we know in our loop more of the people that do that. But for the average person in society, it is just not the norm. And as we know, they're in this societal hypnotic state all the time with the school system and the 9 to 5 and so forth. They've been programmed. It's a programming process. But when some people start tasting it, as you well know, it gives them the opportunity. The mind starts opening a little bit. And a lot of times people don't get that opportunity.
What's the number one skill somebody needs to make money?
Boy, I think it's the sales.
agree.
Learning how to
Just
sell.
curious.
Learning how being a closer, being a salesperson. It is one of the best traits, arts, skills ever. Yeah, and I think, and also the ability to speak publicly, because that's where people make money. I mean, look at the people who make the most money. It's usually somebody who speaks or sings, somebody in front of stages, and that's where people miss out. And then, as you know, that's like the number one fear that people have.
Yep.
Because they're so internalized. What are they going to think? What are they going to think? The illustration I give people on that is if you have an auditorium with 10,000 empty seats, and I put you in that auditorium and you said you had a fear of public speaking, there's nobody in there, you have no fear. You'll go there and talk and do your thing. But the moment people start coming in, you start internalizing this nonsense about, is my hair right? What are they going to think? Am I going to piss them off? And it's just nuts. It's so internalized.
So they need to lose the need to please others.
100%, 100%, and that's why when I help people, like if we're doing video and camera and so forth, and they start overly concerned about saying the right thing or the look, I say, look, you got to stop this. Nobody watches somebody on a video and go, oh my gosh, they've got 3 pieces of hair out of place. It's just we just got to get out of that stuff. Right. We got to get out of our head, and when we get out of our head, we're going to end up serving people because we're not thinking about us all the time, which is a normal tendency anyway, right?
I own the URL putoutcrap.com.
I like it.
And then I also own the URL putout2.0.com because I think that really is it, is that you take any success story, Amazon, Apple, any success story, and you can go back to its roots, and they put out crap.
Yes.
When Steve Jobs did his first order of computers,
right,
and they came back basically as motherboards.
Yeah.
They weren't computers, they were motherboards. And the person he was selling them to said, I can't sell those. The end user will never use this.
Right.
And then, there's photographs of the first Apple computers.
Yes, I've seen it.
And it's wooden.
Yeah.
It's built on a wooden base because that's all he had. And I tell people, I've launched this broadcast. We're brand new. We're just a few weeks old. And it's not what I would like it to be. I come from a broadcast background, so I'd like to be in a TV studio.
Yeah, I know.
Look
I get
like
that.
the 5 o'clock news.
Right.
We're just not there yet.
Yeah.
Everything begins, though.
Yes.
And I think that's the hardest part for people to recognize is it's going to be hard in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I tell people you got to get through the suck.
Yep.
You got to get through the times when it sucks.
So true.
And, it's also, again, coming back to the metaphor of flying. It's not if something happens, it's when something happens, because something's going to happen. Something's going to go wrong.
And they're done that.
There's going to be malfunction. There's going to be interference. There's going to be a flock of birds.
Yep.
Stuff's going to go wrong. And so, again, you got to deal with it. You don't have a choice. You've got to deal with it, or you die.
Right.
And I think sometimes people don't realize that, we don't think about the consequence of not dying.
Yes.
We don't think about the consequence of time going by and getting older.
Yeah.
And, we're going to destroy our relationship or our health.
Right.
And then one day we wake up and we go, I'm alone, I'm broke,
Yeah.
I'm old, and I'm unhealthy.
I think that was one of the greatest advantages, I will have to say, from being in the cult. I'm up typically at 4 o'clock every single morning. I lost so much of my life that I wake up very early and try to get back as much as I can. I read 2 to 4 books a month. I mean, I'm up at 4 o'clock every morning practically, and I'm starting work. Go. My health, my diet. So yeah, I totally relate to that. Because when you look at somebody and say, "Hey, you're dying," and they look, "Huh? What do you mean?" They don't get it consciously. I know if I said that to you, you would get it right away. You get it. So you got to move. The gun's on your head, right?
Life is for the living.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
Back to the cult. I have always been fascinated by cults. And I'm guessing you too, because you've lived through it.
Beyond fascinated with them now.
Yeah. For me, I've always been fascinated how people would be so driven. And so I would read books about the beginnings of Apple or Microsoft.
Yes.
And they would talk about the fact that the team would stay there and work for weeks on end without ever leaving the offices.
Yep.
They would sleep on their desks. They would eat pizza, breakfast, lunch, and dinner
100%.
just to get something done. And I said, how great would it be to have an idea that was so compelling, so motivating,
that people would have that
get behind
mindset.
it and do that. And again, in my life, I have one motivation now. I have one motivation, and my motivation is to set up my wife and my children for
the rest of their,
whatever lives their kids would ever want to have.
Right, beautiful.
And that's all I care about.
Yeah.
I've already lived 1,000 lifetimes.
Yeah.
Thank you, God. I've had blessings beyond anything I could ever imagine. And all I care about, and then the one piece right after that is, because they're my family,
Yes.
I love people, I also care about the planet now.
Yeah.
Because now I realize it's not enough to take care of them. I've got to figure out how to take care of the planet so the planet treats them well.
Take care of them, yeah.
And again, we take a look at somebody like a Donald Trump, and I don't know what your politics are, nor do I even care. But I take a look at somebody like a Donald Trump who doesn't take pay, didn't need the fame, didn't become more famous by becoming president.
Right.
Lost $2 billion while in office.
Yeah.
So he's not doing it for the money. I don't
Right.
care what anybody says about it. If you look at someone's kids, their children are a great indication of how they live their lives.
Yeah.
And, there's no comparison between the current administration and Hunter, and take a look at, you pick any one of them, any one of the Trump kids, there's no comparison.
Yeah.
And so, my belief is that there's a point where all of us have to acknowledge that our real purpose in life is to serve others.
Yes.
That our real purpose is to take care of other people. And when we can do that from a selfish point of view, meaning I take care of my wife,
Right.
not because she needs me to take care of her, I take care of her because it feels good to me.
Yes.
And I take care of
totally
my
get
students, and I know that you're the same
Yes,
way.
Totally get that.
That especially, I had no idea about that background for you, and wow, it just gives me a whole new view of you.
What's so funny though, I remember because, obviously I had known about you for years, and I never reached out to you because hypnosis was a bad thing in
sure.
the cult. But here's what's really weird. My grandfather was one of the most famous hypnotists. He actually hypnotized Ted Bundy before they
interesting.
fried him.
Interesting.
And so because of that, my mom limited my exposure to him, and I was fascinated by it, but I couldn't do anything with it. And once I left, of course, I've still never. In fact, I gotta probably get with you sometime and have you do some stuff with me and learn that stuff, because I'm fascinated with Erickson and Milton, Milton and all.
Absolutely.
So I studied all that, and I've actually used that in my programming when I program people, because I was not able to look at that stuff. So it was able to enabled me to go to another level. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting background I've got.
I've done a lot of research on Scientology.
Yes.
You take a look at
same thing.
Jehovah's Witness, Scientology.
Yep.
There's a lot of them.
100%.
And all this stuff that's come out about Scientology that was always there.
Yes.
The
Leah Remini show.
Yeah, Leah Remini's whole series was amazing.
Yeah, I'll say whatever. So she did the show on the Jehovah's Witnesses,
Right.
and I was the one that put those people on that show for that. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, fascinating stuff. Because again, I'm all about the human condition as a hypnotist.
Yeah, sure.
That's just massively fascinating to me.
it's the-
I do a stage show and I get people, sing like Lady Gaga or
Right.
dance like Chippendales dancers.
Right.
And to me, it's an amusement,
Yes.
but it's not an amusement.
No, it's real.
Donald Trump walking along the street, his casinos are all failing. He's $1 billion in debt. He looks down at a homeless person, tells his wife, that man is worth $1 billion more than me right now. Except his brain is wired to know I make money. It's what I
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
And so he's always looking for that. And then you take people on the other side of the spectrum that are remarkable artists, performers, creators.
right?
They just, the Nikolai Teslas of the world,
yes.
who are, was without a doubt one of the most brilliant minds that ever walked the planet, dies penniless.
Yep.
And then somebody like an Edison, who certainly was creative in his own right, certainly did good works in his own right, except that wasn't Edison's power.
Yeah.
Edison's power was harnessing other creative people's power.
Right.
And their
Tapping
creativity.
into that, yeah.
And tapping into that and insisting that his inventors invent things on a clock on a consistent basis. That's fascinating to me.
Yes, that's smart. Very smart. Very smart.
So, our audience is entrepreneurs, business people, people looking for more in their lives, looking for better things in their lives. What would you tell them if you were to give them just some sound advice right now on how to have a better life? What would you say?
There are two things and two things only that I believe that cause us to have the desire and motivation to succeed at anything. And one is belief, but you hear people say belief is everything, but it's not. The other thing is value, the level of importance you put on it. And any time that you feel motivated, subconsciously, whether you realize it or not, those two things are very, very high. And if you're not consciously aware of them, when they go down, you can't stop it. So then you have an emotional roller coaster.
Right.
So be really consciously aware of what your value and belief system is on a consistent basis and learn how to manage it or manipulate it, for lack of a better way of putting it. And you can control a lot of forward action that way. And the other thing, never give up.
Right. How do people get a hold of you? Do you have any?
Thank you for offering. They can go to. I'm on all social media. They can go to my website if they want to come on the jet.
What is the website?
The website's GaryCoxe.com. It's just
COXE?
COXE, yeah. Gary with a COXE. Same handle on all my social media. So
Awesome. Well, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show.
Marshall, thank you. Pleasure.
Great to always spend time with you.
Yes, we'll do it again for sure.
Appreciate it. Over your personal millionaire maker. Getting very excited about my brand new show coming up 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'm going to broadcast live to you. I'm going to give you content, information, emotional, mental, physical, and even spiritual power. I'll also invite some of my cool multi-millionaire and billionaire friends onto the show to give you more direction, more advice for having it all. All the knowledge to get everything you want and so much more. All you got to do is log in to the show to get information coming to you live from the bunker right here at Studio Money.